What's up, Buckeye fans? It's Patrick Murphy and Dave Biddle live from the Woody Hayes Athletic Center after we just finished up in Ryan Day's, we'll call it a pre-Rutgers press conference. There wasn't much Rutgers talk, more than UCLA last week, but still not a lot. As you might imagine, most of the questions were about Ohio State's injuries, specifically, as you asked about, Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. What did you make of Day's response to not only your questions, but sort of the other questions, or maybe lack of a response?
I think if a fan is out there, they were kind of concerned about this. That didn't quell any of their concerns. Like and I don't think it's still time to sound alarms or anything. I will be surprised if either of them plays this week against Rutgers. I'll also be surprised if they don't play against Michigan. Now, how effective will they be, Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate? But yeah, I'm curious to see what happens. Jeremiah's obviously been dealing with something for a while. Ryan Day declined to elaborate on certain things. He was asked, well, what about when he took that hard shot? Who was that against?
Against Illinois when they didn't block. They handed the ball off to him and he came on the end around.
And it looked bad.
Max Clare and I think it was Austin Saraville didn't block, and he ended up landing on his back.
I remember thinking that was serious, and then, of course, he gets up like nothing happened. And Coach Day
did miss a few plays. But yeah.
But, he was back in the game, played the – I don't know if they had a bye the next week, but, played the next game, has not missed a game at all. Even last week he played. But, yeah, it just sounds like he's been dealing with something for a while, and Coach Day declined to say if that play against Illinois was what started all this, and it's just kind of been, lingering and maybe got a little worse. But the way he answered it made me think there might be something to that. That might be where it all started. And then with Carnell, I have no idea. I mean, it was said that he was able to play against Purdue.
Was in uniform.
He was in uniform. He warmed up, and then they said, but he felt some tightness somewhere. They didn't say exactly where. But he could have played. And then I don't know if he re-injured it in practice or what happened. If they were just trying to be cautious, because then he didn't even suit up against UCLA. So I don't know. My gut tells me they're not gonna play against Rutgers. They're certainly not 100%. But I'll be surprised if we'll be down to 11 days from now. I'll be surprised if they don't play in Ann Arbor.
It does seem odd. Because, first of all, Ryan Day has had this policy of not talking about injuries, except when he talks about injuries, because he has done that. I have been on the record. Something I will publish later this afternoon will include, I think it's stupid that they don't talk more about injuries. I get there's a competitive advantage, but these are now paid athletes. This isn't kids anymore or anything like that. I think it would quell some of the drama that we saw pregame Saturday night. I think it would make this much more easy to talk about with people here. I get why they don't do it to some degree, but I also think that now you're going to hear all week about the concerns about this until we get to Saturday and the availability report comes out. And if both these guys are out or questionable, it's going to carry into next week, as opposed to giving us enough information that we can say, hey, here's what's happening. Here's what we know, just like the NFL does. And then we go on about our business. So I think, I guess your thoughts on that first, that they could be a bit more transparent about these injuries to not have as much mystery surrounding what are two major players, not only on Ohio State, but college football.
Yeah, as a media guy, I wish they were more forthcoming. But then I think about it, if I was a coach, I'd handle it the exact same way. In fact, there's times, as you're saying, Ryan Day goes against his own policy and will tell us about it. There's sometimes I'm like, geez, he told us more than I expected right there. Today was more of he stayed true to his policy, and he kept saying over and over again, because people kept trying to ask questions. He's like, I just don't want to go down that road. So if I answer this question, then I should probably answer the next question. So I'm just not going to comment on any of that. So would I like to see them be a little bit more transparent with these injuries? Yes, but I completely understand why they don't. Even the NFL fudges it all the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but at the NFL, you have these injury reports that come out, if a player practiced or not. And I get that you're not going to get that far because not everything's collective bargained and things like that. But I do wish we could get, hey, Jeremiah is dealing with this.
I'm sure Brian Day would say, well, as soon as you can tell Michigan to tell us exactly who's going to play, then we'll tell them. Yeah, no, Justice Haynes isn't going to play. So if you're worried about the Michigan game, which I'm sure all Buckeye fans are rightfully have some concern, you're not going to think, oh, yeah, we're going to go up there and win by 900 points. If you're concerned about the injuries going up to Michigan, that makes sense, especially if these guys are questionable or they might not play. I think they'll play. Michigan is without Justice Haynes for the rest of the season. And Jordan Marshall also is a very talented back. I think Justice Haynes is looking like maybe the second best running back in the country behind Jeremiah Love. He was playing that well for the Wolverines. So he's done. Jordan Marshall got hurt late in the game. Shoulder looked pretty bad. I don't know I bet you Jordan Marshall will play against Ohio State here in 11 days, but is he going to be 100%? The point is every football team in college football is dealing with like injuries to key players right now. And I think overall still Ohio State's in good shape. Overall, after 10 games, it's in good shape. And this is not spin doctoring. I know what's happened the last 2 weeks, but you look at it from, you know, just a season perspective. After 10 games, 12 weeks, they're still in good shape overall. But understandably, Buckeye fans are concerned about Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Because like you said, Jeremiah is probably the best player in college football. He's not going to win the Heisman, but like he's the best player. I bet if you know, every head coach was put under truth serum, and they say, "Who's the best player in college football?" I bet you Jeremiah Smith would win.
I don't even know if you need truth serum.
Yeah, right. You probably wouldn't need that. That'd be kind of weird if you made them take truth serum. And then Carnell Tate's probably going to be the number 1 wide receiver off the board in the NFL draft this year. So it's a big story, and we saw how Julian struggled without them. We'll see. I still think Ohio State's in good shape overall.
Yeah. With Jordan Marshall, Sharon Moore said he's day to day. The X-rays were negative. And then you've got Indiana probably looming on the other side of that game if you do win in Ann Arbor. They're dealing with some injuries, specifically to Surratt, their top receiver, who's not played the last couple weeks.
Hamstring.
Yeah, with a hamstring. And
That
people
lingers.
are talking about Jackson Smith and Jigba in terms of Carnell Tate. You've seen firsthand how hamstrings here a few years ago can linger and cause, you know, players to miss more time than you expect. So, yeah, everyone's banged up, I think is a message. But it is unfortunate that Ohio State is having 2 of their key offensive players missing some time at the very least. Let's look back at last week. Obviously, Carnell doesn't play. But when Jeremiah was on the field, he played 22 snaps. I thought he looked fine moving around, running. Obviously, he had the one-handed catch. But when I went back and rewatched the game, I'm watching NBC does a good job of taking a very high camera angle. And so you can see the whole field. And like he's running full speed, I thought. Now, that doesn't mean something's not bothering him. But if he is on the field, let's just say 2 weeks in Michigan, I think he can play at a pretty high level. What do you think?
I agree with that. And, you know, he was questionable for the game. He probably was one of those things where he probably talked them into playing a little bit. And it's probably one of those things where he clearly was gimpy coming into the game. But you're right. Like, you wouldn't have known it if you didn't already know it just watching him when he was on the field. But he must have, like, tweaked it during the game because I watched him walk back to the locker room, and it was not pretty. That was you know, he was struggling just to walk. Then later on, he looked better. So that might have just been at the end of the first half. He was struggling. When I say struggling, he wasn't like struggling to walk. You could just tell walking. It was a bad, noticeable limp. Looked better in the second half on the sidelines when he was walking around. So I think JJ is going to be fine for the Michigan game. And I agree with you. Is he going to be 100%? Probably not. But can he still play at a high level? Absolutely. Just my opinion. We don't know. We're not doctors. We don't play one on YouTube or anywhere else. But yeah, I think it's a concern. I did a piece yesterday. What's the concern level 1 through 10? We talked about this on 97.1 throughout the weekend and everything. And when you and I did the Bucknuts takeover on Friday, what's your concern level with this 1 through 10? I was at a 5. You know, I'm not sounding alarms. I'm certainly not right, like blowing it off. I'm still right around there. I'm about a 5. So I'm mildly concerned.
Yeah, I looked for Jeremiah Smith at the end of the game, walking up tunnel. I did not find him in the mass amounts of people, but I talked to some other people who did, and they said getting off the bench, walking towards to do Carmen, Ohio, like he looked very stiff, and then walking up the tunnel, it looked better. So whether it's his back, whether it's something in his leg, you know, I think moving around and not just sitting on the bench probably helps, but obviously you still need to be closer to 100%. Carnell Tate, you mentioned it, tightness before the game at Purdue, and now he sits out his second straight game. We obviously don't know where the tightness came from, as you said, but it does seem like it's gotten beyond just a little bit of tightness, or at least there's concern that it could be worse. Is that a read that you have as well?
Perhaps. I'm also curious how many of your friends, family, and just random people that love the Buckeyes have asked you either in person or text or message you if they don't really know you, like on Twitter or DM you, like, hey, are you hearing this as like some type of secret suspension with Carnell? Because I've had about like 400 people ask me that, and I'm not hearing that.
Yeah.
You're not hearing that.
No. In fact, because I was asked, because it was Carnell and Tywan Malone who didn't play at Purdue.
Yeah.
I had somebody ask me about that, so I asked
Daniels.
And well, yes,
Yeah.
I had somebody ask me about that, so I asked somebody who I think would have a good idea, and they said no. What Ryan Day said was the truth. So I think he's definitely dealing with something.
Yeah.
I did see Carnell Tate before the game when he walked out with the full team. He looked to be moving okay. But again, let's say this is speculation here. This is a lower leg type of thing. Like if you have any concern that he might have tweaked like something that could affect your Achilles, for instance,
Right.
you're going to be as cautious as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Because we've seen, I mean, if you're an NBA fan, think about Tyrese Halliburton in the NBA Finals last year. He was dealing with it. He was playing through it. Then he tears it, just steps wrong. And
Kevin Durant a few years before.
Yeah, exactly.
What was Klay Thompson? Was his an ACL or
his usually his knee. I think he did do his Achilles, but
yeah, there's been a lot in the NBA playoffs, like
Yeah.
just the last like 5 to 10 years. You're right, and again, we're not going to play doctor here, but yeah,
we're speculating.
for example, like if you have like a strained calf, that can easily turn into a torn Achilles if you're not careful. Well, I've heard a couple different things with JJ. Again, this is not confirmed. I've heard you kind of alluded to this. I've heard maybe it's a lower back, but I've also heard quad. So I don't know what to believe. I did hamstring, not quad. Quad. So I don't know if it's lower back or quad or something else, but I don't know. Have you heard anything about JJ?
No, nothing. Yeah. And look, we're not. If Ryan Day's not going to talk about it here, people aren't going to talk about it, probably on or off the record. So we're speculating as much as anyone. But the point is, if it is something you think could get worse, these are 2 weeks to not play these guys. Now you mentioned Julian Sayin and that piece I referenced earlier. Deep dive into kind of Julian Sayin. I think all in all, he just had a bad day. He missed early in the game to Jeremiah Smith. Yep. He missed wide open Max Clare, and by missed I mean didn't see him. So it just wasn't his best day, I think, was kind of the conclusion I came to. But still, not having his two top receivers and two of the receivers he's worked with the most this year definitely makes things a bit more difficult. Now, you want to see him play through that and continue to do well. He did have some good throws. He had a throw to Quincy Porter. He had a couple to Mylan Graham. He missed on a couple to Mylan Graham. I think if Jeremiah and Carnell are not practicing this week, that gives you more time to work on it. And let's say that, God forbid, this does linger or something else happens down the road. I think this week, getting more game reps with those younger, less experienced guys could be beneficial if you need them in crucial moments.
Definitely. I thought Bryson Rogers looked good and has looked good. Every time I see Bryson Rogers, does he look like a superstar? No, I'm not saying that, but he looks good. He looks more than competent. He looks like an Ohio State wide receiver, and that's a high bar. So Bryson Rogers needs to, be a starter going down the stretch. Again, I don't think it's going to come to that. I think they'll be okay. And Mylan Graham's, he had that one drop the previous week, and then came back with a nice play. Had a couple. There was a couple balls where it would have been really tough to haul it in from Julian, but you can tell Julian's used to I just usually just throw it up and Jeremiah comes down with
the
that.
vicinity.
What are you doing, Mylan? No, but and again, Quincy Porter's another one. So those three guys, Bryson Rogers, Quincy Porter, and Mylan Graham, just give you really good depth there. And you're right. I mean, in practice this week, in the Rutgers game itself, this would be, the week to get those guys more and more playing time. And, and they're talented guys. And I think Ohio State would be okay. They wouldn't be in a great position if they had to use, Brandon Ennis as their number one. And then guys like, Bryson Rogers and Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham fighting for those other jobs because they're so deep at tight end. Again, guys, I don't think it's going to come to that. I think Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate are going to be fine. Ryan Day even said after the game, it's not long term. Some people said, well, does that long term, does that mean like after the Michigan game or before? I'm like, I get it. But yeah, it's not anything that's going to keep them out for multiple weeks. It doesn't sound like, when I say multiple, like 3 to 4, could be 2. It already has been for Carnell. But yeah, this is the week to do it. It's the same thing at right guard. Like, let's say they're going to make a change at right guard. I don't know if they will, but Gabe Van Sickle, another guy coach was asked about. Not only did he play well this past week, he played more snaps than Tegra.
He did. Some of that was with the second team offense.
True. But that's the first time I believe we've seen that because Tegra's rotated out of the game every game this year. Started every game and rotated out, but he still ended up with more snaps than the guy that rotated in for him. I believe it in every game until this one. So it wasn't just the snaps that Gabe did. It was that he graded out really well, I think. Coach doesn't say exactly who did at Champion, but he said he played well. You put those two things together, Gabe Van Sickle played well, and he played more snaps. I wouldn't be surprised if they make a change at right guard, but you don't want, even though Gabe's a kid from Michigan, you don't want his first to ever start to be at Michigan. So if you're going to make a change, and I don't know if they will, this would be the week to do it. Similar to what you're talking about with wide receivers, like it could be a good opportunity to get those guys more in the mix.
I don't think they're making a change. I think if they were making a change at right guard, we would have seen it already. At this point, I think you're going to get what you're going to get. And look, I spent some time watching Tegra. It wasn't great, But like the first drive, if you go back and watch Tegra on every play of the first drive, including the 1-yard touchdown by Bo Jackson, there was some good in there. And that's the problem, I think, when we're talking about Tegra is like, you can see why they want him in there. And then you also see why there's been issues, because at times it's like, you missed assignment. You're not even getting to the guy you're supposed to block. Then there's other times where he's the reason they get a run. So it's been weird. I don't know why you can't get it to click consistently. Going back to the wide receivers just for a second, we've heard for so long how deep and talented this wide receiver room, and I'm going beyond this season, back beyond this season. This is the time to prove it, right? Like,
Right.
If Julian Sayin is the Heisman Trophy winner and you've got a deep, talented wide receiver room, they should be able to go out and look better than they did last week against the Rutgers team, who, let's be honest, not very good. That's why we're not talking a lot of Rutgers. And even if you need to against Michigan, like, this wide receiver group should be good enough to win you games in the Big Ten, I think.
Yeah, especially you look at that Michigan game. I mean, how many points is Michigan going to score in this Ohio State defense?
And that's the other thing.
You don't need to go into Ann Arbor. Are we overlooking Rutgers? Yes, we are. Because we can do that. We're not on the team. We don't coach the team. So we're allowed to look ahead. We don't need the Buckeyes themselves, but we can look ahead. And you look at that game, like if Ohio State scores 17 points, I think they're going to win. If you tell me they score 21, I mean, lock it up. I do not see Michigan scoring 21 points on this defense. I'll be somewhat surprised if they get to double digits. Now, did I say the same thing last year? You bet your butt I did. You bet your butt I did. So I get it. And they were, the look ahead line right now is Ohio State favored by 11.5 at Michigan. Pretty big line, right? Here at the Horseshoe last year, Buckeyes were favored by 21.5. So inexplicable what happened last year. Worked out well in the end for the Buckeyes, of course, after that. But yeah, I mean, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but
should be able to throw against Michigan.
Or you're not even going to need to put that many points up against Michigan. So it's not like you have to, like, well, Bryson Rogers better go out there and have like a 100-yard game with 2 touchdowns. Like, no, it has to be an efficient offense. But hopefully Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate are out there they don't have to worry about. But regardless, Ohio State's not going to have to score a lot of points to beat Michigan. They just have to do better than what they did last year.
Real quick before we wrap this up, anything else that stood out to you from Coach Day's comments?
Not too much. I was going to bring up Gabe, but I already brought up Gabe Van Sickle. We'll see what happens there. Josh Padilla, nothing new on him. Nobody asked about C.J. Donaldson, I don't think, did they?
No. He was in uniform on Saturday.
Yeah, I imagine that's a precaution. Like, you got 4 running backs. No, nothing of too much interest. And then tomorrow we're going to get Coach Day again after practice.
Yeah, and I imagine some of the seniors, it will be senior day on Saturday. Not as big of a senior class. Ryan Day talked about, he was asked about the seniors and what they've brought, and he talked more about the juniors and sophomores stepping up as leaders. He did get asked about James Peoples and talked about how, he's sort of, his mentality has changed over the course of the year.
Yeah.
I do think we kind of forget with James Peoples that he only had 50 snaps last year, 49 snaps, I think, or 49 touches, maybe it was. So he is still a young player, and it maybe just took some time for it to come along. I did think, we talked about after the game, that was his best performance, and
oh, yeah,
that's what you want to see. Now, UCLA, not a good rush defense.
No.
Rutgers is even worse.
Rutgers is the worst defense in the Big Ten. I think, is UCLA the second worst?
Yeah.
It's right around there. Yeah.
They're both outside the top 100 nationally.
Warm-up games here, my friends.
Yeah, but I think at the very least, getting confidence for Bo Jackson, getting Isaiah West in the end zone, getting James Peoples having those runs, that confidence can help carry over as you play better teams. Now, you still have to execute. And I was talking with Marcus Hartman earlier before the press conference started, and he brought up the point. They're breaking tackles. And again, not the best tackling teams they faced, but they weren't breaking tackles against bad tackling teams early in the season.
Bo was sometimes.
Bo was, yes, but as a group,
as a group, you're right.
I think you're starting to see those missed tackle numbers go up, and that's going to be important going forward.
No doubt about it. We've said we're blue in the face. Good running backs, especially great running backs. More often than not, they make the first man miss, and they fall forward after contact. Again, there's going to be times, no matter who you are. You could be Christian Okoye or Mike Allstott. You're going to get knocked backwards sometimes. Am I going old school on you? Yeah. Derrick Henry, is that better? There's going to be times even the greatest running backs get knocked backward. Eddie George, but few and far between. They make the first man miss. They're falling forward after contact. That's what I see out of Bo Jackson. And Pat's right. You're starting to see it out of the entire group now. I know CJ didn't play this last game, and as Pat said, UCLA, terrible rushing defense. But the last thing you'd want to do is be like, geez, they played a terrible rushing defense, and they couldn't even run the ball against them.
Yes, exactly.
But they put together their best rushing performance of the season, and the stats would have looked even better the previous week. Good stats the previous week against Purdue. Again, another bad team. They would have looked even better if that 70-yard touchdown run wasn't called back on a very ticky-tack call. Correct call by the book.
Yeah.
Ticky-tack.
Yeah. All right, we're going to wrap it up. Steve Helhagen was posting Ryan Day's press conference, so you should be able to find that on our YouTube page. We'll have it on Bucknuts later, and we'll have plenty more throughout the week as we head into the Rutgers game. So thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks
It's
for
just
tuning
they
in.
know to private capital.
And with that, we're out.